tower to read Eastern 401, just turned on final.
Eastern 401 heavy, continue approach to 9 left.
Continue approach, roger.
I'm gonna try it down one more time.
You want me to test the lights or not?
Yeah, check it.
Which seat back?
Okay.
180.
Hey, we did some of the altitude here.
What?
We're still at 2,000, right?
Hey, what's happening here?
11:30 midnight in 1972. While preparing for landing, the plane had the most advanced and modern technology at that time. Suddenly the light bulb broke. All the crew was focused on it, and no one knew that the death bells were ringing loudly. The plane crashed into the swamp at a terrifying speed, leaving no signs of survival for anyone on board. A seemingly normal journey suddenly turned into a disaster. From now on, rumors of ghosts lurking on the plane wreck and mysterious voices echoing in the night began to appear. Are these ghosts real or not? Or is it all just human imagination? To find out the answer, let's go back a few years to a fateful journey, Flight 401 Eastern Airlines. On December 29, 1972, Eastern Airlines flight number 401 was responsible for carrying passengers from New York on winter vacation. 65 people missed their flights because of traffic jams. In the end, the plane took off with 163 passengers and 13 crew, much less than expected. The night flight later that year had 3 pilots: Captain Robert Loft, First Officer Albert Stockstill, and Flight Engineer Donald Repo. In addition, in the cockpit were the company's maintenance expert Angelo Donadio and an off-duty pilot sitting in the cabin. Captain Loft, 55 years old, is a veteran pilot who has flown planes for decades. He has nearly 30,000 hours of flying experience. Co-pilot Stockstill, 39 years old, is also an experienced pilot. But both of them had accumulated less than 300 flight hours with this new L-1011. Flight 401 left JFK Airport at 9:20 p.m. and headed south toward Florida. Everything went smoothly for almost the entire flight. Even in first class, a passenger successfully proposed to his girlfriend. A few hours later, L-1011 began entering Miami airspace. Captain Loft now checks the approach and landing information. The weather cleared and the pilots saw the runway in sight. The plane is now preparing to land. But when Captain Loft lowered the nose wheel, a problem arose. The nose indicator light does not light up. Using the most basic technique of turning it off and on again, after retracting the part and lowering the wheel again, the light still does not turn on. If the plane lands and the wheel lights do not light up, there is a problem with the locking mechanism and the wheels may collapse upon landing. They will have to circle in the air until the lights come on or visually verify that the nose gear is locked. After Loft pilots reported the situation to air traffic control, they received orders to fly into the waiting area on the west side of the airport, maintaining an altitude of about 600 m to avoid obstructing other aircraft from landing. Strangely enough, Eastern 401 was not the only plane that had landing gear problems when arriving at Miami. Previously, National Airlines Flight 607 also reported a similar situation. The airport must mobilize emergency response in case the plane crashes. Therefore, in the chaos, Flight 401 received less attention. An accidental touch. Plane L-1011 now increased its altitude to 600 m. Flight engineer Don Repo suggested how to check the lights. After review, the pilots confirmed that the indicator light was burned out. Even though they knew it was just a light burning out, they still didn't feel secure, because they weren't sure if the landing gear was securely locked or not. At this time, the plane reached the required altitude and activated autopilot mode. Rest assured that the plane's modern autopilot mode had been turned on, and all 3 pilots turned to deal with the broken light bulb. Captain Loft felt they were spending too much time on the light bulb, so he asked the repo engineer to check the wheel on the nose gear. Below the cockpit floor, there will be a compartment with a small window. From this window, the engineer can see the wheels on the nose of the plane. If they are straight with a red bar, the gear is locked. At this time, the plane began to change direction. The city lights disappeared and were replaced by the black space of the swamp. When Captain Loft turned around to ask repo engineers to check the wheels, he accidentally pressed the control button to turn off the autopilot mode and switch to manual driving mode. Thus, the plane can no longer maintain altitude, and the pilot is forced to control it himself. But none of the three pilots discovered that. At Miami International Airport, the National Airlines plane landed safely. After the distraction was over, the controller saw that the altitude of the Eastern 401 was only 274 m. To be sure, this person contacted the flight crew of Flight 401. Captain Loft still confidently thought the plane was at an altitude of 600 m. When co-pilot Stockstill suddenly looked at the altitude display, he suspected something bad. He asked again skeptically, "Are we still at an altitude of 600 m?" But Captain Loft was startled to discover that the plane was plummeting to the ground. The devices rang continuously when the plane suddenly descended. Captain Loft leaned forward and pulled the joystick, but it was too late. At 11 hours 42 minutes and 12 seconds, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 crashed into the swamps of Everglades National Park at a speed of 365 kilometers per hour. The lights flashed and then went out. The cabin was dark. Metal hitting each other makes a deafening sound. The L-1011 slid hundreds of meters. Fuel overflowed the tank and a fire began to flare up. Ghost stories. Things did not stop there. After the devastating accident, a series of ghost stories began to appear. Those lucky enough to survive continuously encounter strange stories about the ghosts of those who died during the ill-fated flight. First, right at the scene of the accident, rescue workers around the area said that they occasionally saw more than 20 ghosts still wandering around. Among them is the ghost of Captain Bob Loft, who once appeared before a flight attendant and crew during the plane crash and said, "No such accident will happen again, we will not allow it." This happened again. Later, some intact parts of the ill-fated plane were used and assembled on other Eastern Airlines aircraft. From here, many mysterious things continued to happen, and unusual phenomena continued to occur on different flights of L-1011. Almost all of the reported appearances include the ghosts of Robert Loft and Don Repo. Witnesses said that their images were extremely vivid and realistic, like real flesh and blood. Specifically, a flight attendant on Flight L-1011 recounted that a pilot's ghost appeared mid-flight, warning her about a fire about to break out in the cabin. And that warning happened the next day. Or the story of the vice president of Eastern Airlines when he flew to Miami in 1973. Because he was a VIP, he sat in the first-class cabin near the cockpit. When moving back to his seat, he saw a pilot, so he approached to talk. After a while, he realized that the person he was talking to was Bob Loft, so scared he almost fainted. Afraid that there was something bad about the flight, he asked for a thorough check of everything. Fortunately, the flight landed safely until the last minute. A few months later, a flight crew at JFK Airport was surprised to see Captain Bob Loft sitting on the flight deck. At first, they still talked normally, until they realized it was Bob, and the ghost also disappeared. The flight was canceled immediately afterward because of confusion and fear. The above stories are just a few examples of a series of alleged encounters with the ghosts of Loft and Repo by pilots, flight attendants, passengers, and the deputy CEO of Eastern Airlines. Investigators also investigated these spiritual phenomena, but were later refused to cooperate by Eastern Airlines. Interestingly, while denying and avoiding any topic related to ghosts, Eastern Airlines silently removed all the parts taken from Flight 401. Immediately after the parts were removed, that part were removed from other planes, and people have not heard of or seen the mysterious phenomenon since then. In 1991, Eastern Airlines went bankrupt. Although it no longer exists, the legacy the airline leaves behind is the title of the world's most haunted airline.